When we look at the United States today, we see power, skyscrapers touching the sky, massive industries, one of the strongest economies in the world. But there's a question we rarely stop to ask. What was the cost of building this power? If we turn back the pages of history, we uncover a chapter that is often uncomfortable, disturbing, and deeply human. A chapter where economic growth came at the expense of freedom, where prosperity was built on suffering. In this video, we'll explore how slavery became deeply connected to the American economy, how millions of African people were reduced to property, and how the consequences of that system still shape society today. This is not just history, this is a reminder of what happens when profit matters more than humanity. The story begins in the year 1619. That was the year the first Africans were forcibly brought to the English colony of Jamestown, Virginia. They did not arrive as immigrants, they arrived as cargo. At the time, European colonies in North America were expanding rapidly. Land was abundant, farming was essential, and labor was desperately needed. At first, colonists relied on indentured servants from Europe, poor workers who signed contracts to work for several years. But once their contracts ended, they became free. For plantation owners, this was a problem. They wanted labor that was permanent, cheap, and completely controllable. African people were chosen for brutal reasons. They were physically strong, adapted to harsh climates, and most importantly, they were dehumanized. Over time, slavery became legally recognized. Laws were passed stating that enslaved people were property. They had no rights. They could be bought, sold, punished, or killed with little consequence. Even worse, children born to enslaved parents automatically became slaves. Human beings were turned into assets, and the American economy began to grow on that foundation. The southern United States developed an economy built almost entirely on agriculture: cotton, tobacco, sugar, rice. These crops required intense, exhausting labor, day after day, year after year. This led to the rise of the plantation system. Large estates owned by wealthy white landowners, worked by hundreds of enslaved people, forced to labor from sunrise to sunset. No wages, minimal food, horrific living conditions, violence as discipline. From an economic perspective, slavery was brutally efficient. Enslaved labor drastically reduced production costs. Profits soared. Cotton alone became America's most valuable export by the mid-1800s. And the benefits didn't stop in the South. Northern factories processed slave-grown cotton into textiles. Banks provided loans backed by enslaved people as collateral. Insurance companies insured slave property. Shipping companies transported goods produced by slave labor. Slavery wasn't just a Southern issue, it was a national economic system. This is where a visual graph works perfectly, showing the explosive growth of cotton exports and national revenue. America's wealth was growing, but it was being fueled by forced labor. As time passed, the United States began to split into two economic identities. The North industrialized rapidly. Factories replaced farms. Wage labor became the norm. Cities expanded. The South, however, remained dependent on agriculture and slavery. For the North, slavery became increasingly unnecessary and morally questionable. For the South, ending slavery threatened economic collapse. This wasn't just a political disagreement, it was an economic conflict. Two systems, two visions for the country's future, and neither side was willing to back down. Tension grew, compromise failed, and eventually the conflict exploded. While profits increased, the human cost was devastating. An enslaved person had no legal identity, no freedom of movement, no protection under the law. Families were torn apart without warning. Children were sold away from their parents. Husbands separated from wives. Culture, language, and identity were systematically erased. And perhaps the most lasting damage, the invention of racial hierarchy. The idea that Black people were inferior, less human, naturally suited for servitude. This belief didn't disappear with slavery. It became embedded in society. passed down through generations, and its effects are still visible today. By the mid-1800s, the divide between North and South became impossible to ignore. In 1861, the United States descended into the Civil War, one of the bloodiest conflicts in its history. In 1863, President Abraham Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation, declaring enslaved people in Confederate states to be free. By 1865, slavery was officially abolished. But freedom did not mean equality. The Southern economy collapsed, plantations fell apart, and millions of formerly enslaved people were left with nothing. No land, no money, no education. Many were forced into exploitative labor systems like sharecropping, which closely resembled slavery in practice. Legal slavery ended, but economic and racial oppression continued, just in new forms. The story of slavery teaches us a painful truth. Economic growth alone does not equal progress. When prosperity is built on exploitation, on stolen freedom, on broken lives, the cost is carried for generations. Even today, the legacy of slavery shapes social inequality, racial tension, and economic disparity in the United States. True development only exists when economic progress is tied to human dignity. Remembering this history matters because forgetting it allows the same patterns to repeat. This was America's dark chapter, not to assign blame, but to demand understanding. Only by facing the past honestly can a society move forward justly.